we've got this reciprocity. We've got this sense that they genuinely love one another and they take care of one another, even though they only have like split seconds when they're both human each day. And they're not always in the same space when that happens. And then we're meant to like, I guess, I feel like we are meant to be sympathetic to Navarre completely taking her agency from her in that moment. I mean, he's doing it for, I guess, like the right reasons. I'm putting quotes around that because he thinks he's doing it for her benefit and for her best interest. But like, I'm sorry, fuck that. She's an adult. She's a human. I mean, a hawk human, but still. Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit. I'm Tracie Guy-Decker, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit, because pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I'll be sharing my deep thoughts about the 1985 Richard Donner film Ladyhawke with my sister, Emily Guy Birken, and with you. Let's dive in. All right, Em, I know you saw this because we saw it together when, like, probably multiple times when we were youngins, when it was new. What do you remember about Ladyhawke?
So I remember Matthew Broderick's haircut and learning that they made it to look like a old-timey monk tonsure, and by old-timey, 14th century. And then I learned later on that it's not possible without modern clippers.
Modern clippers.
Which actually I think will come up later in our conversation. So I remember that. I remember Dad pointing out to us, there's a point where he steals someone's purse by cutting the strings. And he's like, that's where the word cut purse comes from. And I remember thinking that was super cool. So I remember that. Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer. I remember her name is Isabeau because I thought that was a beautiful name. And it was around when I started being a Francophile. And they're cursed by a bishop or something. She is a hawk by day and a woman at night. And he is a wolf at night and a man by day. And they are very deeply in love, and they're together, but they're not actually together because there is no way for them to I remember there's a scene just as the sun sets or rises, one of those where they're transitioning for just a second. They get to see each other as human beings. And there is an eclipse at the end, which is how everything is, how the curse is broken. So those are my
Damn, you remember a lot. I don't even have to do a synopsis.
Okay. Apparently this is a well-remembered film.
Yeah, you remember a lot. All those things are accurate.
So tell me, why are we talking about this today?
You remember more than I did. I did not remember the cut purse thing. Although there were things that while I was rewatching, I was like, oh yeah, But yeah, I loved this movie when we were kids. I loved it. And so my last lead, I looked at SpongeBob SquarePants, so I wanted to go back further. And so I was trying to think of something that was, I've been looking at romance a little bit lately. And I think that, after the little detour of SpongeBob, I wanted to go back and look at romance again and sort of see what's in there. Because I just didn't remember. I certainly didn't remember the way that you did. On rewatch, some of the things that I'm gonna bring to you are about gender, but specifically gender in romance, and also the way that Pfeiffer embodies Isabeau and kind of how she shows up. It's better than I thought it might be. I'll say it that way. She very easily could just be a trophy, and I think she is a more fully formed character than that, which is a testament to Donner and to the screenwriter and also to Pfeiffer. I think she really did a great job. I mean, the woman's gorgeous. I mean, and her presence in this film, her gorgeousness, she's gorgeous no matter what she does. But in this film in particular, it is a plot point, but it also is just there for anyone to see.
Mm-hmm. Just real quick, you said Donner. Just wanted to, I don't think we've said.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Richard Donner directed this film.
And-
I did open with that way.
And he's a friend of the show because we've already talked about his film Superman the movie.
So we talked about Superman the movie. We talked about The Toy. We talked about Goonies.
Yes,
those are all Richard Donner films.
Yeah.
So I believe this is our fourth Richard Donner film.
So he, like, I didn't know this, but he basically directed a lot of our childhood.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk about gender, and specifically gender and romance, because there are ways in which, despite the fact that they are not actually together in human form, there is reciprocity between these two. And there are ways in which there is not. So I would like to talk about that and sort of what that separation and the romance of that separation did to little like baby cooking brains of ours. I also want to talk about the actual craft of the film. The film gets a lot of flack from people who are like, well, so the music is like Alan Parsons produced, as in the Alan Parsons Project. And he's not the one who wrote the score. Somebody else did. But it's super synthesizer heavy. Like, it's very 1980s. So there's a lot of folks who kind of really give it a hard time for having this so-called anachronistic music for this movie that is set in the 14th century. Broderick's performance, so Broderick plays basically the narrator, and he's the character who is the bridge between these two people who can never actually be together. And this is before Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but it's sort of like, it's like he's getting ready for Ferris Bueller.
It's Ferris Bueller's 14th century.
Yeah, it kind of is. Like, he has this running monologue with God. I mean, he's talking directly to God. So it's not a direct camera address in the way that Bueller is, but it is sort of like, it does feel like a 14th century John Hughes movie sometimes. So people find that like bothersome somehow as well. I actually think it's cool and it works, and it's kind of like none of it is realistic. So why would I, like, these people turn into animals? Like, why do I care that there's synthesizer music, you know? It's also the case that it is shot in Italy, I believe. Like Donner's, like, the cinematography is really gorgeous. Like, the actual landscape feels much bigger than this goofy 80s fantasy romance. So, like, all of that together, like, to me just works as a whole package. But I want to kind of unpack some of that. So, but before I do, I'm going to give a little bit more of a synopsis than you gave from your memory. But I actually am going to rely on Wikipedia to try and get it done relatively quickly and concisely if I can. So thank you to Wikipedia editors here.
I've heard that one before.
I know. We'll see if I can do it. So I am reading from Wikipedia. In medieval Italy, it says Italy. I think it's supposed to be France. It's Frank Italy. It's Ital-Francia. It's Europe. Philippe Gaston, a thief known as the Mouse, is captured and sentenced to death, but escapes from the Bishop of Aquila's dungeons through the sewers. He is apprehended at an inn by Captain Marquet and the bishop's guards. Former Captain Etienne Navarre arrives on the scene, and he and his pet hawk attack the guards and then escape with Philippe. Navarre and Philippe ask for lodging at a farmer's barn. At dusk, the farmer ambushes Philippe with an axe, but is killed by an enormous black wolf. Philippe runs back to the barn to get Navarre's help, but instead finds a beautiful young woman dressed in Navarre's cloak, who calmly approaches the wolf and walks into the woods with it. The next day, Navarre reveals he needs Philippe as a part of a plan to kill the evil Bishop of Aquila. Philippe refuses, so Navarre ties him to a tree. That night, the young woman reappears, and Philippe tricks her into cutting his bonds. He flees, but is recaptured by Marquet and the guards, who learn Navarre's location from him. Navarre once again fights off Marquet and his men to free Philippe. In the process, his hawk is shot with an arrow. Traveling slowly due to injuries of his own, Navarre orders Philippe to go on ahead of him and take the hawk to the castle, it's like a ruined castle, of an old monk named Imperius. Philippe obeys, and Imperius sequesters the hawk in a locked room. Philippe picks the lock and discovers the young woman, now with an arrow protruding from her chest. Your suspicions are confirmed.
I remember the monk, like, he's saying, like, I have a hawk from Navarre. And he's like, oh, then we shall feast. He's like, no. It's his hawk. And the monk's like, oh.
Yeah. Okay. After Imperius treats her wounds, he explains to Philippe that the woman is Isabeau of Anjou, who once refused the bishop's unwelcome advances. After learning from a drunken Imperius that Navarre and Isabeau were married, actually, I don't think they said married, it just said in love, that they were in love, the bishop called down a satanic curse upon them, dooming them to be, quote, always together yet eternally apart. That's what Philippe says about it when he hears the story. Navarre therefore takes the shape of a wolf each night, while Isabeau becomes a hawk by day. The bishop guards attack the castle shortly before daybreak, but the sunrise turns Isabeau back into a hawk, allowing her to fly to safety. She's actually like falling, like as Michelle Pfeiffer falling from the top of the tower, and like just as the sun hits her, like she like narrowly escapes. Navarre catches up to the castle and dispatches the last of the guards. Imperius tells him that the curse can be broken if the couple can both face the bishop as humans on a day without night and a night without day within 3 days' time. Navarre dismisses Imperius as an old drunk and continues his way to Aquila, intent on simply killing the bishop for revenge. Philippe volunteers to join Navarre and Ladyhawke, that's what Philippe has nicknamed the hawk, and bids Imperius to follow them. After the group survives an encounter with the bishop's hired wolf trapper, César, and several other adventures, Philippe finally convinces Navarre to try to break the curse before killing the bishop. When the group arrives at Aquila, Navarre, seeing no divine signs in the sky, once again decides to kill the bishop and orders Imperius to euthanize the Isabeau hawk if the church bells ring, as would signal Navarre's failure. Philippe, having snuck back into Aquila through the sewers, the way he had escaped it, infiltrates the cathedral and unlocks its doors. Navarre rides in and duels with Marquette. It's not a duel. It's a, what's it called when they run at each other on horses?
Oh, joust.
Yeah. It's a joust, like in the cathedral. Like the mass worshippers are all just like around the sides. Like they're jousting.
That's one of the official sports of Maryland.
Okay. During the fight, Marquet, the current captain of the guard, like tosses his helmet up and through this like roundel window, and through the broken window, we see a solar eclipse. So Navarre realizes that Imperius was right, but he fails to stop the bishop's men from ringing the bell. So he thinks Isabeau is dead. And in fact, we see Imperius holding the hawk. She's got like, the hawk has the hood on that like covers its eyes, and he's holding a knife and he says, "May God forgive me." So we viewers are meant to think she's dead too. So Navarre is about to kill the bishop, and the bishop says, but if you kill me, the curse will never be broken. What about Isabeau? And he says, Isabeau is dead. And then behind him, he hears her voice. Navarre? So then he realizes that he can break the curse, so he forces the bishop to look at her, and then look at him, and then look at us! And then Imperius says, it's over, it's broken. Navarre turns to approach Isabeau, and the bishop says the line that we hear in so many movies, "If I can't have her, no man shall!" And he's like about to like ram he's got like a sharp point on his bishop's staff, and he's gonna like, stab.
Like you do.
As one does. So he's gonna, he also made a deal with the devil. So he's gonna stab Navarre, but somebody warns him. I don't remember who. And so Navarre turns around and like throws his long sword, and like it flies through the air, impales the bishop on the, I don't know what it's called, like a piece of
a churchy
like
thing.
A churchy thing. Yeah. And then
we're nice Jewish girls.
Yeah. It's like a churchy wooden thing, like a panel, a wooden churchy panel.
Part
thing.
Of the bema.
It's got a cross on it. Yeah, it's the cross panel thing on the bema. So we watch him die, and then the lovers embrace, and he picks her up, and she's laughing, and he's like, "You cut your hair," and like all the people who are in the cathedral room are just sort of watching. And then there's like Navarre calls Imperius and Philippe over, and the four of them kind of hug.
Oh,
and Navarre
doesn't Imperius like kiss Philippe or something, or like
when they are watching the two of like the whole thing go down, like they kiss, not romantically, but
no, like thank
but
goodness.
Sweetly,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and Philippe's like crying.
Yes, Philippe is actively crying. We see tears running down Matthew Broderick's face. And then the four of them together, more kisses are exchanged. Navarre kisses Philippe first, and then Isabeau does too. So, yay.
Happy ending.
Yeah. So a couple of key moments that Wikipedia didn't name that I want to name in terms of like pieces of dialogue that kind of stuck with me that I think appealed to me as a child. Mm-hmm. The first one is fairly early on. Marquet is telling the bishop that Mouse has escaped and no one has ever escaped from the dungeons of Aquila before. And he was just a petty thief. So like, it's not a big deal. Like they got much worse criminals down there. And the bishop is like, no one escapes. You need to find him. It's like the kind of power. Mm-hmm. And Marquet's like, I mean, all right, but it would take a miracle for him to have survived with the way that he, like, because he went through the sewers. And the bishop says, I believe in miracles, Captain. It's a part of my job. Which I find, like, as an adult, I find absolutely ridiculous and hilarious and, like, beautiful. And I think as a kid, I probably, like, unironically loved.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah.
Another was the one that the Wikipedia does name, although it doesn't credit him, which is, like, when Philippe first hears the story, he says something like, always together, eternally apart, which is, like, oh. Mm-hmm. Like, unironically when I was a kid, and now, mm-hmm. like, wow. And the other one in the same vein is Philippe is like really like weirded out, as one is when the hawk that they were minding turns into a beautiful woman. And so he's looking at her. She's got this crossbow bolt sticking up out of her like chest shoulder area. And he's like, what are you? Are you flesh or are you spirit? And she says, she like looks at him and then kind of looks away and says, I am sorrow. And the thing is, like, certainly in 85, I believed her.
Oh, God, yes.
And even in 2025, I was like, oh.
It takes someone of the caliber of Michelle Pfeiffer to sell that.
She really did, too. I mean, anyway. I am sorrow. The last one that I remembered while I was telling the I am sorrow one is, so Philippe's talking to God the whole time and he's making deals with God. And it's actually, I think, pretty funny. Mm-hmm. So, because like while he's like escaping, he promises God he'll never pick another pocket for as long as he lives. And before he's even like fully out of Aquila, he cuts that purse mm-hmm. that you remember. Mm-hmm. And he says to God, like, I know I told you I wouldn't do this, but I know you know what a weak-willed person I am. And then at the end, as he's sneaking back into the dungeons, he says, I wonder if this is what your plan was all along. I have to say, it would reflect well on you, he says to God. Which again, like, I don't know, I just found pretty delightful. Mm-hmm. So anyway, those are just a couple of like specific dialogue pieces that I wanted to name before I get too far into analysis. So all done. So let me start with gender. Mm-hmm. So this film doesn't even pass the first question of the Bechdel test. Isabeau is the only named female character. There are a couple of other women who appear on screen, like the farmer that they stay with that first night that Philippe is with Navarre has a wife or sister or something.
A woman who lives with him.
Yeah, but she is an extra. Uh-huh. And then at one point we see in his garden, we see women sort of dancing for the bishop. Again, completely extras. So she is the only named woman. And we are meant to know that she is extraordinary in every way. Like, we're meant to know that, in part because of the way the other characters treat her, in part because, you know, they cast Michelle Pfeiffer mm-hmm. in 1985. So she was like at the height of her magnificence mm-hmm. by societal standards. Mm-hmm. And like, even as a hawk, somehow we like feel her presence. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't pass Bechdel. It doesn't even pass the first Bechdel question. And in many ways, so as I said, like in some ways there is a reciprocity about this love mm-hmm. that we are meant to believe. So Etienne Navarre cares for her when she's a hawk. And he also, as a wolf, protects her. We see the wolf protect her. But there are ways in which she also cares for and protects him. So in a very early scene, the hawk startles and kind of attacks some of the attackers, the would-be attackers of the bishop's guard, and helps them get away. And as a woman, we see her protect the wolf as well. And in fact, in a very key scene near the end, they've convinced Imperius thinks, I don't know if he knows the eclipse is coming, but he knows God spoke to him and he knows that they can break this curse if they can keep Navarre from screwing it up by killing the bishop too soon. And so Imperius and Philippe convince Isabeau that they should do this. And so they're going to trap him as a wolf to keep him from going to kill the bishop too soon. And they try to lure him into a trap, but he crosses across ice to get to her and falls through the ice. And she risks everything to try and save him while he's in the water. In the end, Philippe actually gets him up out of the water and gets all scratched up. And that's when Navarre sees the scratches on his chest the next day. That's how he changes his plan and decides to go along with them. There's another moment where the Wikipedia named that the bishop had hired this wolf hunter, and Isabeau and Philippe see the pelts, and she takes the horse, Navarre's horse, and goes off in the woods to try and find this trapper to protect Navarre. And in the end, she ends up killing he kind of kills himself, but she helps the trapper get killed in his own wolf trap, like a bear trap claw thing that ends up on his head. It's pretty gross. So there's a sense in which there is a reciprocity in that way, which I think is actually kind of rare, especially for a story set, in the distant past.
Well, it's presented like kind of a fairy tale almost.
Yes.
And so it would be rare for a fairy tale. And if you're taking on the trappings of fairy tales, you often take on those kinds of expectations and rules too.
Right. And then there's two moments where it sort of challenges in the reciprocity, but in interesting and in some moments problematic. I don't know. We can unpack it. So one thing I actually did remember that was one of the scenes that was oh, I remember that when I rewatched it, was at one point, Navarre and Philippe are talking in the morning, and the hawk comes flying from a distance, and Navarre puts his arm up for her to land on his forearm, and Philippe is kind of stretching, and the hawk lands on Philippe's arm, passes Navarre to land on Philippe's arm, and they're both and there's clear jealousy here. And then there's what happened last night, and it's the night after the killing the wolf trapper. And that's actually the moment too when Philippe says, she's the most amazing woman I've ever met. And yeah, I've had my fantasies, but the truth is she only ever wants to talk about you. Whatever. It's unclear to me. Philippe tells each of them things that the other one said that we, the viewer, did not see them say. It's unclear to me whether or not we're meant to think he's pulling a Cyrano and lying to strengthen the romance, or if we just didn't see them say those things. It's unclear to me. As a kid, I think I thought the first, that he was lying. It was Cyrano. I think probably I'm leaning toward that with this as well, because Philippe has a loose relationship with the truth.
That's pretty clear.
That's been made clear.
Yeah.
And when he does tell the truth, he says something to God about having told the truth.
Yeah.
So I think there's that moment of jealousy. But then it is, in the end, when both Navarre and Isabeau kiss Philippe in sort of gratitude, it's there's that moment of jealousy, but it's less about sort of possessiveness and more about he even says, Navarre says, every moment that you spend with her, I'm jealous of, but not in the how dare you be with my girlfriend, just I can't. So there's something alive for me in that feels a little bit more nuanced and interesting than the sort of traditional gender roles in romance. that I might have expected from a fairy tale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
this is where we always get.
At the end, they've got this plan. And as Wikipedia told us, like, Navarre doesn't see the signs. He tells Imperius, Wikipedia says euthanize. He says, make it quick, because I don't want to condemn her to a half-life without me. Nobody asked the hawk what she wanted, right? Like, it's not even that I think that, like, the film or the story shouldn't be willing to take suicide as, you know, as an option that one of these characters might take, but surely she should be allowed to choose it and not be euthanized, as Wikipedia put it. And, like, thank God, like, Imperius says to Navarre, I can't do it. I don't think I can do it. And Navarre's like, no, you have to, because this is your fault. Because initially Imperius was the one he was the confessor to both of them. And that's how the bishop ended up finding out that they were together. So, and we are meant to believe he's done it. Like, we see that cut scene where he says, may God forgive me. And he's got the hawk in his hand and a knife in the other. So we've got this reciprocity. We've got this sense that they genuinely love one another and they take care of one another, even though they only have, like, split seconds when they're both human each day. And they're not always in the same space when that happens. And then we're meant to, like, I guess, I feel like we are meant to be sympathetic to Navarre completely taking her agency from her in that moment. I mean, he's doing it for, I guess, like, the right reasons. I'm putting quotes around that because he thinks he's doing it for her benefit and for her best interest. But, like, I'm sorry, fuck that. She's an adult. She's a human. I mean, a hawk human, but still.
Now, is there any sense that he is aiming to protect her from the bishop's, like, lasciviousness or anything? Like, not that makes it okay either.
No. No, it's from protecting her from a half-life that she didn't choose or something like that. Yeah, no, it's about. Yeah, it's just it's unacceptable.
It's kind of ableist in a weird way.
Yeah, and I guess so. I mean, and he had his own version of it, you know. So one imagines that, like, that's what he would want in the. If the inverse were happening, except that, like, again, let her transform and then choose.
Yeah.
So so that one piece, like, that one plot point, which was essential. Yeah.
I was thinking, like, they had to do that.
Because Navarre needed to think she was gone.
Yeah.
And that all hope was lost, so that there was nothing left for him but the revenge that he came for in the first place. Like, we needed to have that moment so that we could have the big reveal and the, like, very dramatic, look at her, you know. But
it would have, for the writer and Donner, all it would have taken was one moment of, we're agreed. Like,
yeah. I talked to her about it. This is what she wants too.
Yeah. I told her your plan. She agreed. And then, like, even Philippe, like, checking with her, like, is this what you want?
Well,
yes. I don't know. Whatever.
Well, actually, I guess Navarre and Isabeau can't actually speak.
No, they can't. So they would have to agree through an intermediary.
Through their intermediary.
Or, like, I don't know if they're able to write because this is 14th century.
That's not a part of the story.
Yeah. So like, they would have to agree through an intermediary. All they'd have to do is
have said that they did.
Said that they did. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And like, yeah, would have taken 2 seconds.
Yeah. So that's there. That's in there as part of the furniture of the mind. The other thing that's you know, I don't think I'm certain I didn't catch in 1985. I just thought of it. There's a moment where, after Philippe has learned the whole story, he's talking to Navarre, and Navarre says, "Do you know that wolves and hawks both mate for life? He didn't even leave us that. He didn't even leave us that." Like, they can't get it on in their other forms. Like, with other, you know, like their non-monogamy, like her with a boy hawk and him with a she wolf. They can't do that because wolves and hawks mate for life. I guess that's what I'm interpreting.
What?
That's like initially when he first said they mate for life, I was like, oh, yeah.
There's something kind
And then he said, yeah. And then he said the bishop didn't even leave us that. That is what that means, right?
I can't think of any other.
Right. I can't think of any other reason like why you would say the bishop didn't leave us that. Sorry. Okay.
All right. I'm just thinking about like hot lupine and hot. I don't know what the Latin word be. Hawkine sex would be. Bow chicka bow wow.
Anyway. Okay. So that's funny. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about on the romance piece of it. I will say that like little baby Tracie thought that this was like just so romantic.
Yeah.
Like this, like being separated but being together but not being able to be together, like that is like so deep down in the like romance DNA, like maybe from this movie or others like it, you know, but like that idea that this unrealized requited but unrealized longing as like some sort of model for true romance is like deeply resonant. And I don't know if it's because of this movie or this movie is just like
I think
dings the bell.
I would really like to dig into this a little bit just because I definitely feel that as well. That like mutual pining is it just lights something up inside of me. And I have spent time thinking about that because that is not what a real healthy relationship can ever be. And in fact, it's kind of toxic to be in a situation like that. And like this film gives you like an okay reason for it. Like, because it's outside of their control. Whereas,
completely outside of their control. Yeah.
Whereas, like, a lot of we talked about X-Files early on, and like they were kept apart for, Chris
Stupid
Carter's reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which removed their agency when it came to like, and there's, like there are points at, there I have been reading like long series where it's like, will they, won't they, like book series. And eventually I lose my patience because it's like, just freaking talk to each other. Because it's trying to recreate that mutual pining that is so deeply satisfying. And I wish I understood why.
Yeah.
And so that it can stretch it out to 5 books. But, like at some point, adults need to talk about their feelings.
No, I won't.
So, yeah. And so like, there's like, I can definitely understand why this film in particular lit you up because it's not stupid why they're apart.
It's magical.
It's magical.
And
yes.
that also, like, that's another one of my, one of the stars in my constellation is the magical.
And they can also do the loving things for each other. That is another thing that I find deeply satisfying while still mutually pining. So like I think there's a very good reason why this lit us both up as children, like why we both really loved this. I also think there's something very human about being drawn to these kinds of like tragic love stories because your spouse leaves the toilet seat up and socks on the floor and, you have bad breath in the morning and, life is not romantic.
Yeah.
Pining and not being able to be together, that is romantic.
Yeah. 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 I think you're onto something. For sure.
So, but it does worry me. Before we started recording, I was saying like, it worries me because I like the pining so much that our sister podcast, Lightbringers, I talked about how like Devastated Lucifer is my favorite Lucifer. And at the very last episode, they gave a lot of fan service with like the two of them just like hugging each other and like snuggling. And I'm like squirming with discomfort. Like, that's enough now. It's like, I want them apart and like in pain. I'm like, what is wrong with me?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think maybe what's wrong with you is Michelle Pfeiffer saying, I am sorrow. Because damn, she looked good saying it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to move us on to my final bucket here. So the final bucket is actually like a pullback away from the content and looking at the actual form. So this movie gets a lot of like, I read one commentator who said, I'm going to write about a cult 80s film, which is actually a redundant statement because every 80s film is cult for somebody.
Yeah.
So this one, it does have a lot of people who love it, but a lot of critics at the time and since give it a really hard time for so-called anachronisms, right? So it's meant to be set in 14th century Franco-Italy. And like I said, the score is very 80s. Like, it was pretty cutting edge in 85. I mean, it was like, damn. It is really. And so people give it a hard time for that sort of anachronistic music, or so-called. And I mean, it is. But they also, and then they give Broderick's performance a hard time. They say he was sort of doing his Biloxi Blues thing because it was pre-Ferris Bueller. And, you know, he is. But like, so? Like, I find it, now, I loved it at the time. And I was a child. And looking back now as an adult all these years later, as you say, it's a fairy tale. Right? It's a fantasy. Like, it's not a real place. It's not actually based on a real fairy tale. Like, I think I read somewhere that there was like a sense that it was kind of like based on an actual medieval tale. It wasn't. Like, they let that be like the mythos around it because that, you know, that sells movies. But it was just some dude's idea, you know? Like, the writer just was like, oh, this would be a cool story. So he wrote the story. And it was made for 1980s American audience. You know? So, like, already, like, they're all speaking English.
Well, and it's American actors.
And they've got, like, even, like, what's funny to me, like, Broderick has just his normal whatever accent through most of it. But then there are moments where he has this kind of like Shakespearean stage actor kind of an accent presentation.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was meant to, like, if Mouse was supposed to be doing that or if Broderick forgot that he was doing the accent. You know what I mean? I'm choosing to believe that Mouse was doing it. But I don't know, honestly.
Yeah.
And like, if we stop trying to ask it to not be what it isn't and just enjoy what it is, I think the 80s score really works. I think the Biloxi Blues treatment of Philippe Gaston, known as the Mouse, really works. Like, he's a ridiculous character. Like, in the very first moment we meet him, we're just seeing like this like mud and sewage and like fingers sticking through. And he says, nothing is impossible, Mouse. And he's like pushing his shoulder and head through this like opening. He says, it's just like leaving mother's womb. Now that's a memory. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous from moment one. And when the guards come to get him, his cellmate speaks in rhyme. Like, to ease the pain, he went down the drain. It's just ridiculous. And I think if we can just let it be what it is, like, I feel like we put a lot of pressure on things that claim to be set in the Middle Ages to somehow be like historically accurate. I'm putting quotes around that because we don't actually know a lot of things about the way things were in medieval times. And the things that we do know, like, I don't want to see on screen. You know?
don't want to see. No bubonic plague, thank you.
Like, I mean, they make mention of the plague when like the bishop calls the wolf hunter to come in and he's got all these pellets and the bishop's like looking through them and he's like, no, that's not it. That's not it. Like, these are not the wolf I'm looking for. And the hunter is like, well, since the plague, there's more wolves than people, you know? And like they mention crusades and Sarah, like, it's like vaguely in our universe, but also like kind of not. So like, I don't know. So I think there's something really interesting that like, and you, before we hit record, we're talking about like what it is that as audiences, we're willing to suspend our disbeliefs about and what we're not. And so,
yeah, I mentioned about the like kind of tonsure haircut that Broderick has that is not possible with tools at the time that this is supposedly set. But the thing is, not a single person who complains about the soundtrack says boo about his haircut because his haircut fits what we think that time looks like. And so what we call realistic is just what confirms our preconceived notions about history. And so I mentioned before we started recording about the Tiffany problem, which is Tiffany is actually a very old name, and it was a relatively popular name in the Middle Ages in English-speaking countries. But modern audiences hear it as a modern name. And so if we had, if Isabeau had been named Tiffany, people would have been like, what the hell is this? Even though it would have been period appropriate. So there's that tension of like what we expect versus what actually was. And then there's the tension of like, as you mentioned, like, what are we willing to suspend our disbelief about? Consistently, when you have fantasy stories that are set in some kind of historical period, so I'm thinking specifically Game of Thrones, people will say, yes, yes, dragons, yes, women giving birth to monsters, yes, yes, all of that. And we'll say, why does there have to be so much rape in it? And like, well, it's historically accurate. And to be honest, I even can see this in some modern takes as well. Like, I can remember our stepfather complaining about how they changed the ending of Pretty Woman to be a happy ending instead of the more realistic ending where Julia Roberts's character ends up strung out on drugs at the end instead of it being, you know, a happy Hollywood ending, and he'd be like, it's just wrong. It should be the realistic ending. I'm like, why? like this isn't based on like a real person. Like, you know, okay, I'm down with like getting annoyed at them changing like the story for a movie when it is based on like historical events that actually happened. But like, why is that more realistic?
Yeah.
But like, why is it more real? And another moment that I like really helped me with this viewpoint is Roger Ebert, our friend. The movie A Knight's Tale, which came out, I think, in around 2001. I remember seeing it right around when I graduated from college. And the music, there's a dance scene, and I can never remember which one's diegetic and which one's non-diegetic, but it's the music that the characters can hear, not just what the audience can hear. I think it was a Queen song. I think it was like Another One Bites the Dust, but I might be misremembering, but it was definitely a 20th century song. And Ebert in his review talked about how like, yeah, people have a problem with that. But the thing is, if we put the kind of like Bach or, you know, classical music that you think of as appropriate, it's still anachronistic because it's 400 years too late.
Right.
You know, so what if it's, you know, 600 years too late?
Right. Right.
You know, we're creating an enjoyable story that includes things like music, and like the thing is, everybody's speaking modern English.
Right.
So why do there need to be rules about what the soundtrack sounds like? If it works for the story, it works.
Yeah. It's really interesting the way, like, what as audiences we're willing to accept and what we're not. So I think that's, and this movie, I think, with the soundtrack, with Broderick's performance and dialogue, like what's written for him, is sort of kind of tests that. And at the same time, I think I mentioned before we started, like it's filmed, I think, in Italy or Ireland or I don't know, some beautiful sprawling country land. And like some of the landscape pieces behind this ridiculous fantasy, like, are gorgeous. I mean, they're just really gorgeous. Like you expect them in a much more serious film. And so I think I find that very interesting that Donner and the other filmmakers sort of took these gorgeous landscapes and these big, big shots that belong in a different film. And this music that was really very contemporary and very now. And these actors who were very contemporary and very now, and decided to sort of put it in this story from then, but it's not really, because it's not actually an old story. Like I find all of those tensions and all of those yes and, yes and, yes ands to be very, very interesting. And then what comes out on the other side, like I actually really loved it. Like I enjoyed watching it, both as a 9-year-old and now as a 49-year-old. I don't like those contradictions don't bother me because I don't think they're contradictions because they're all in service of this one little story. And so I think but I think it's an interesting thing to ask why for some of us, it's like, okay, cool, whatevs. And for other people, it's like, I mean, I was with you with the curse. But Alan Parsons music? No.
I draw the line at synthesizers.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
Well, I think it's also interesting to know, like, who gets to gatekeep this stuff.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah.
Because that's part of it.
Yeah.
I would like to, like, kind of ask you about one other thing before you wrap up.
Before I wrap up.
So I find it really interesting. So it is kind of a fairy tale. There's magic, but the magic is still within the Christian ethos.
Sure.
Because he's a bishop and he, like, makes a deal with Satan. And so, like, I find it, like, fascinating that our narrator is a faithful ne'er-do-well. Like, he truly believes in God. He's having these regular conversations with God. And similar, the monk who is kind of a screw up, it sounds like too, but also is truly faithful. And it's giving us this kind of like dichotomy between the faith of imperfect people and then like the greed of those who are in charge, like the greedy faith of those who are in charge. I believe in miracles because it's my job.
Yeah. No, and he is shown to have a lot of power, and he wields it over people. Like I am power. He doesn't say those words, but he makes that very clear. Yeah. He makes that very clear to Marquet, who is the captain of the guard, and to others. So yes, that's a very interesting point. So we as an audience are meant to see sort of an authentic faith of a thief and of a disgraced priest. And that's where the authentic faith is, because Imperius says God showed him how to like God has forgiven him for the mistake that he made, and to prove it has given him the power to break this curse that he feels responsible for. And Navarre says, God hasn't given you anything. God's made you mad. So like he doesn't believe. So I think thank you for sort of lifting it up. But there is definitely an interesting like tension and like the ultimate lessons about God and faithfulness. I mean, at one point, Navarre says something about God as well. And Philippe says, no offense, but I talk to God all the time and he's never mentioned you. So,
oh my God, that is delightful.
Yeah. What's interesting when you ask it that way, though, is because this faithful ne'er-do-well, this faithful thief, who makes a promise to God and almost immediately breaks it, while saying to God, "You know what a weak-willed person I am." There is definitely something very interesting, like, and those are the folks they get rewarded. There was a beautiful sort of symmetry around Philippe's escape and then re-entrance. And in fact, that's why Navarre picked him in the first place, because he's the only person who ever escaped. And so he can help him get back in. So yeah, I think there's definitely lessons in there about power and greed, and even feminist ones to an extent about the bishop's desire to control and own Isabeau, that he had no right to, not just because he was a bishop, but then that need is really ultimately, that desire to control her, to own her, is ultimately what caused him to make a deal with the devil and then die. So, and we see him sort of tortured by it. Like we see him having like fitful, like nightmares and things. So I think, yeah, there's definitely some, thank you for bringing that up. There are definitely some lessons about faith and cosmology and like
it's also
right living.
Yeah. It's interesting because the thief and the disgraced priest are practicing like a Christianity that forgives. And the bishop is clearly practicing one that has no forgiveness.
Well, and it's all about loyalty.
Yes.
One-way loyalty.
Yes.
To him.
Yeah.
To him. There is also something very, very clear about faith in love. Not just faith in God, but faith in love that Imperius and Philippe both have. I mean, that's why they're crying. That's why they're crying and like kissing one another at the end, is because they have so much faith in the love between these two people, and they want to see it
get to the point where he's leaving socks on the floor and she's got bad breath
yeah.
in the
Well,
morning.
they want to see it realized and healthy and not like just a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let me see if I can wrap this up. So 1985 Richard Donner film, Ladyhawke. We've got Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer and Matthew Broderick. John Wood is the bishop. Super creepy. Super creepy. And Leo McKern is Imperius. So those are the key actors. And honestly, they all do a great job. They're very fun. This film does not pass even the first test of the Bechdel test, which asks us, are there at least two named female characters? Do they talk to one another? Do they talk to one another about something other than a man or a boy? The answer is no. There's only one named female character, Isabeau. And she is pretty amazing. Not just like beautiful, which is made very plain. I mean, it's Michelle Pfeiffer. And also in the way that the other characters react to her, but also like she is playful, she's clearly smart, she is bold, she is courageous. Like we see all of these things. She has this very big presence. And the love between her and Navarre, which I don't know why we never call him by his first name. His name is Etienne. She gets a first name, he doesn't. I don't know. Anyway, the love between them is clearly real and reciprocal. And there is reciprocal caregiving and reciprocal guarding and protecting that is really kind of cool and unexpected. I think we named it. This is the reciprocity between them feels unexpected and rare in a fairy tale, especially one set in the Middle Ages. Where we lose that reciprocity is at the end when Navarre unilaterally decides that if he fails in his mission to break the curse, that Imperius should kill Isabeau in the Hawke view. And as you pointed out, like it would have been actually very easy narratively to fix that and to have given Isabeau agency and suggested that she had agreed that death by suicide or death at the hand of Imperius was better than a half-life. We didn't get that. He took that agency from her. We also saw a moment that was kind of interesting in terms of thinking about romance and gender roles in romance, where the Hawke lands on Philippe's arm when we expected, and he expected it to land on Navarre's. And so they have this conversation actually about jealousy, which is not the jealousy of possessiveness, or not precisely anyway, that one might expect. There's no sort of, I'm going to kill you because I think you slept with my girlfriend. It's more like, tell me everything. You get to spend time with her in ways that I can't. That was actually sweet. And then lastly, we talked about sort of the storytelling and the medium of film and the sort of choices, the directorial choices to like use a score that was very contemporary music with lots of synthesizer that now sounds very dated, but sounded very hip and now in 1985. The choice to have Matthew Broderick with this sort of running monologue, which is directed at God rather than the viewer, as it will be a couple years later in Ferris Bueller from Matthew Broderick, but still like kind of an 80s sort of feel narratively as well, because it was sort of the Biloxi Blues that Matthew Broderick had been doing. And also some of the like bigger things that I named, like the beautiful cinematography of the countryside, which I expect in a much bigger, more serious movie. This movie doesn't have a whole lot of like dramatic gravitas. And it never was meant to. I mean, that's not what Richard Donner did, right? Like Superman, Goonies, The Toy was one of his movies that we've talked about. Like this is like, he was making entertainment, but the cinematography is not just sort of like a quick and dirty teen film, right? The cinematography is something like much bigger that like has Oscar aspirations. So all of those things together, I think are a really interesting mix that to both like little 10-year-old or 9-year-old me and also 49-year-old me is kind of like, yeah, bring it. Like, what's going to tell the best story with this, Michelle Pfeiffer, who's a hawk, and Rutger Hauer, who's this awesome black wolf. And like, okay.
Well, it's the kind of thing that when you read Shakespeare, there's a lot of stuff, there are jokes that were topical that probably felt like, that's not appropriate in Hamlet. That's not how the Danish do things, whatever. But now, because we're so many years on, they're not topical anymore. They're historical. And so we have so much trouble viewing things that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're close to them.
I think you also named that there's a certain kind of confirmation bias that like we expect it to be a certain way, that Roger Ebert helped you see with The Knight's Tale, where the music that we have come to expect in sort of Shakespearean or medieval or whatever, like is itself anachronistic. It's just that we've been doing that anachronism for so long that it feels somehow natural. I'm putting quotes around that word. And Alan Parsons did not feel natural for this medieval story. So that's like a really interesting thing just about the way that culture informs culture and then seems like it's not cultural. Seems like it's somehow actually like baked in truth. So that's a really interesting question. And then you asked me to think a bit about faith in this movie and sort of what the lessons were about faith. And I think the fact that we have this very faithful thief and faithful disgraced priest and this very like not faithful, like literally satanic bishop are very interesting pieces in terms of thinking about cosmology and good and evil and whatever in this film. So much so that like one of the things that I think your question helped me to see was part of the faith that Imperius and Philippe have is in love, but also I would say in other people. So there is a faith in God. There definitely is, but it is expressed and like manifest through their faith in other people. So there's something like really lovely about that rejects the idea of the kind of high church faith, which is based on power in one individual who can become corrupt, and much more in a kind of faith of the people, a faith of relationship.
Yeah.
And in like a faith in, I mean, it's expressed in the love between these two people, but then it comes outward too, because then they also express their love before the film ends for Philippe and Imperius and for the work that they did and the risks that they took in order, in the service of love. So there's something really, really nice about that, in this little throwaway fantasy.
That
film.
The scene of I have visceral memories of Matthew Broderick crying and kissing the priest.
Yeah.
It like that stuck with me. Because it's how I feel about other people.
Yeah. That's nice. Well, so anyway, I'm glad I rewatched it. I'm really glad we put it on the list. I had a lot of fun. So next weekend, what are you bringing me?
I am bringing you my deep thoughts about the Kevin Kline film In and Out, which is the other one that should have let me know I was neurodivergent.
Besides Chasing Amy. Cool. Well, see you next week.
I'll see you next week.
This show is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. If you enjoy it even half as much as we do, please consider helping to keep us overthinking. You can support us at our Patreon. There's a link in the show notes. Or leave a positive review so others can find us. And of course, share the show with your people. for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes.
Thank you to Resonate Recordings for editing today's episode.
Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?